Support for Amplified Voices comes from the Restorative Action Foundation. Learn more at restorativeactionalliance.org.
Everyone has a voice, a story to tell. Some are marginalized and muted. What if there were a way to amplify those stories, to have conversations with real people in real communities, a way to help them step into the power of their lived experience? Welcome to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. Together, we can create positive change for everyone.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Amplified Voices. I'm your host, Jason, here with my co-host, Amber. Hi, Amber.
Hi, how are you doing this morning, Jason?
Doing great. We're in Connecticut. Our guest is on the West Coast. Marty Weiss, it's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
We are going to start with the same question that we have been asking all of our guests, and that is, could you tell us a little bit about your life before you entered the criminal legal system and what brought you into it?
Sure. I was born in 1964 in Los Angeles, lived here all my life, grew up in an affluent community known as Encino. I don't know if you've ever seen Encino, man, but it's definitely a nice area. Dad, a doctor, and mom, a housewife when she wasn't leaving us in the hands of a maid or two. For the most part, it was a nice life growing up, but it was also a little freaky because mom was always talking about those damn homosexuals. And I really didn't know what a homosexual was until I opened up a dictionary and realized, oh, wait, she's talking about me. So I was very well aware of, some feelings out there in the general world at the time. I was always saying I didn't like girls. It was kind of a funny thing early on. I just didn't want any girls kissing me, even mom or aunts, grandma, or anyone else. But as I grew to understand my true feelings, liking guys, it became my safe haven because saying I don't like girls was my way of not having to say that I like guys. So I kind of kept myself safe in my own little world. I was also a scrawny, weak little kid, so I was bullied a lot too. So, I fit the standard stereotype.
So you're just 1 year older than I am. And I know that if you're going to school, people would use, you're so gay as an insult or you're fag or whatever. That was like the worst thing you could say to somebody back in our generation when we were growing up.
Especially when you understood what those words stood for. And I think one of the things I was most ashamed of when I was young, there was this one day when I was 13 years old, I was at the Olympic Auditorium of professional wrestling, boxing, roller derby, and I knew where the wrestlers hung out so I could go get autographs. And there was one day that I was standing up there toward the back and it was pretty empty. There's no wrestlers around, so I'm just kind of going, okay, well, I'll watch the matches from up there. And some big guy comes walking up behind me, and he's about 5 years older than me, a lot bigger, and he kind of brushes up against me. And I knew what he was doing, but I didn't want to be a part of it that way. I like guys, but I didn't want to be forced. So I walked forward a couple of steps thinking, well, maybe it was just accidental, give him the benefit of the doubt. And he walked up again, did the exact same thing. And I had to use the words. I had to turn around and say, stop rubbing against me, you faggot. I just had to use those words to get him to turn around and run, which he did. He ran right down the back stairs, out the door to the parking lot, and never came back.
How old were you?
13.
Oh, wow.
I hated doing that. Here I have a potential ally, but I also know that he's not going about it the way that I would want to. So it was difficult. 13 was a very difficult age because at that time, my mom was also getting involved with an organization called LifeSpring, which is kind of like a Mooney type camp, supposedly self-help, but really a cult. And she had already been very abusive anyways, both physically and verbally over the years. On the one night that we were supposed to go there, all hell broke loose because I couldn't hug a girl and they wanted me to hug somebody in the room. And I ran out, and for an entire hour in the car heading back from LifeSpring to my home, my mom was just on top of me big time with all kinds of comments. What the hell's wrong with you? Why don't you like girls? What's wrong with you? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when we got home, A girl helps make your bed. Maybe you shouldn't be sleeping in your bed. A girl helps make your dinners. Maybe you shouldn't be eating. You know what? A girl brought you into this world. Maybe you shouldn't even be alive. And this is coming from my mom.
And you were 13?
Yes.
I just want to take 1 minute to really acknowledge what you just shared with us and say, I'm sorry that that happened to you. As I'm listening, it's really affecting me thinking of myself as a 13-year-old, everything that you're going through at that time in your life. And to have somebody who you really care about and who is part of your family react in that way, just out of a lack of understanding, must have been very difficult. So I just want to acknowledge that.
I appreciate that. And yes, it did lead to a suicide attempt. I won't go into details. I'll just say that I tried. 13 for me was a defining age in so many different ways. A couple years later, I'm over at a friend's home helping him out with a school project. Thing is, he's not in my class, he's in my brother's class. And the two of them were working on this huge history or social studies project together. And my brother gave me $20 to write it for him because I was a good student. Anyways, I'm over at my brother's friend's home helping him with the project. And his brother, well, he just kind of grabbed me and pulled me down on top of him in what was supposed to be a little wrestling match. Without going into too many details, that was my first boyfriend. And we were together in a solid relationship for 2 years. And then because I had to go away to college, it became an open relationship. And then we kind of parted ways. But thank goodness for somebody like that in my life.
So your first relationship was at 16 to 18. Is that about right?
Yeah, my first real relationship. Yes.
So let me ask you this. Did you feel ashamed of who you were and what was going on? Or did you just feel like the society was just awful and you didn't belong and you wanted to change? I mean, what is that for you?
It was a combination of both. I was ashamed because I'm gay and I know the whole world hates me for being gay. On the other hand, it's like, what the hell's wrong with society? What the hell's wrong with the world for hating me just because I'm a little different? And I learned to understand that. I learned to realize that I should not have shame for being gay, that I should accept myself for who I am, that there are people out there that I can love and who love me. And it was a huge relief, like I said, to have Corey in my life. And then to spread my wings later on, when I went to Arizona State University, the first week that I was there, and I'm opening up the paper, and there's an ad for the LGAU, Lesbian Gay Academic Union. And I'm going, oh my God, there's some people I can go to. I can be a part of that community. I graduated, of course, and I managed to make some connections in the entertainment industry. Part of that process was getting involved with the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, also writing for the state press editors and being able to set up interviews with people from the entertainment industry. I knew it was who you know, not what you know. And it was through those people in the industry that I actually managed to get my first jobs as a publicist. One was assisting the unit publicist for Rambo 3. Another was representing a Thai science fiction writer. And then I introduced him to somebody who I had met, director of Friday the 13th Part 7 and special effects artist. I got them hooked up, and then he was looking for a publicist. So he asked the writer. He gave me glowing reviews. So all of a sudden now I've got a blossoming career for about 3-4 years, but it was also very hectic, very difficult. And I ended up with an ulcer.
So working in Hollywood for you is something that really called to you from an early age.
Oh, absolutely. I think I was like 9 or 10 years old when I started really getting into movies, and primarily horror films and comedies. If there was a Marx Brother film or a Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi film on TV, back away, that TV's mine. Those are the things that I was really into. And the fact that I was pretty much a loner and nobody else liked these things, nobody else was into them. It was my own personal fantasy world. And I just loved getting myself entrenched in it. So anyways, with the ulcer and a couple of sexual assaults against myself, including one from the publicist, I gave up the publicity business and I had to find something else. And I was a talent manager for 14 years. My clients worked with the elite of the industry, big names, the biggest. Eventually, there was one young man came up to me and told me that he was gay and asked me if I'd be interested in doing something with him. I made the wrong decision. I based it on all of my own personal life experiences, what I had dealt with, all the bullying, the hatred, the shame issues, the fact that I needed a mentor. I put all this together and I said, you know what? Okay, I'll have a relationship with him. And I didn't realize that that could be harmful. I didn't realize that that in itself was abusive. I screwed up. I mean, yeah, I was selfish. Yeah, I was getting pleasure out of it. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to argue that because I was. But I was obviously hurting him and I didn't know it. And when he was 18 years old, he went to his dad and dad did the right thing. That's where I caught my case.
All right, let's pause. First, I want to talk about how emotional and sincere you're coming across. And I see how painful it is for you to talk about this. You know, I appreciate you've taken accountability and you've clearly learned a lot over the years. And as we know, and you know, nobody's the worst thing that they've ever done. And we're very proud of who you are today. Also want to acknowledge while we're here that I feel bad. I'm sure Amber would agree for the person that you harmed back then. And hopefully that person is doing okay today. But this is your episode. So we're going to stick with your story. And again, I think you're a terrific person and very glad to have you on as our guest talking today.
I appreciate that. A year ago on Twitter, I posted a comment in a tweet. And a couple of hours later, there was a tweet from him, which I was not expecting. I had no clue that that was coming. It was forgiveness. It was a beautiful sentiment. And there is a healing. It's a long process. We're both progressing. I know he wants to be involved in a therapy situation with me, and I'm more than happy to be there. If he chooses, I'm there.
I do want to echo some of the things that Jason said in terms of, we talk to a lot of people and we are concerned with harm reduction, and accountability is a very important part of that process. And it's very clear that that's been very important to your journey as well. And so I definitely want to acknowledge that. And I think that one of the things about the conversations that we're able to have on this podcast, some people may call them difficult conversations, but if we're not having these conversations, this is where things kind of get swept under the rug and cycles of harm can perpetuate. So I really am very appreciative of you being so vulnerable and authentic in terms of your own journey. And I think that will really come through for our listeners.
We're all human beings. We're not monsters, although society would like to believe that we are. And, every single person in this world has caused harm to somebody else at some point in time, some worse than others. But once again, we're all people, and I can guarantee you that the vast majority of people who have caused harm in any way, shape, or form have themselves been harmed, perhaps even in similar ways before. When I was in my therapy groups, and I was helping to co-run them at a certain point in time, one question that I would ask is, how many of you were sexually molested when you were underage? And I asked this many times of many different groups. And with the exception of only one person, every hand went up. There's only one person who ever said that he wasn't. Now, the statistics are placed at around 30%, but I think it's much higher than that. I don't think it's as high as what I got, but I think there is a cycle of abuse. I think there are certain things that are ingrained in the mind. And granted, what I did is not the same thing as the things that were done to me. I mean, at 9 years old, I was sexually assaulted in a park. I had the 13-year-old experience. In my early 20s, there was a chiropractor, there was the publicist, and then there was an ex-friend who actually raped me. I mean, There was penetration, and I got him to get off of me. But I was doing so by telling him I was calling the police. I never did.
You went through a whole lot of harm before your offense. That's something that we've heard a lot of, and people rarely look beyond the stories and the headlines. Because you were in Hollywood, because you represented famous people, the media had a field day with you. You lost your employment. You go into a period where there's a lot of loss. And not only are you now labeled as somebody who's the worst of the worst because you have the sex offender label, you also are a gay man, which, as we know, is also an additional stigma. So all of your worst fears are coming to pass and you're out in the spotlight. So you can take us through some of that.
Well, it has been an ultra surreal experience for me. You know, in a way, as horrific as it is, it's not unusual for my life because I went through the same thing years ago because I was gay. I went through a ton of bullying. And so what I've dealt with in the past couple of years is really no different. What's different between me and maybe your standard registrant is that most registrants, I'm just guessing this, have not had that kind of experience. And so they have even more difficulty dealing with it. I mean, at first, it was horrific. I did try to take my life coming out of jail. That was actually stopped by one of my best friends, and I love him dearly. Today, he's still one of my best friends. At those times, I was having 13 years old is obvious. Mom's the worst bully in the world. That's the last thing I need. And, it's like, this is the person I have to live with. This is the person who could throw me out on the street if she finds out I'm gay. Coming out of jail, my life is over. My career is over. See if I've got friends still around. Some, yes, but most of them, no. There were some beautiful souls who were there for me, thank goodness. But today is a different story because I've learned how to live with it. I've learned how to survive it. I call myself a survivor of the registry because not only am I surviving it, but I'm fighting it. Back in the day, when Governor Pete Wilson signed anti-gay legislation, I took to the streets. I was out there marching with thousands of other gay people. We closed down the Beverly Hills shopping mall. We closed down Sunset Boulevard, Santa Monica Boulevard, Beverly Boulevard. We closed down LAX. We were vocal. We were loud. We were shouting, we're here, we're queer, we're everywhere, get used to it. And I realized then that you have to stand up and fight for your rights, not only for yourself, but for other people today too. I've been a litigant in several court cases. I am standing up and fighting. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving in. I'm not allowing hate, and I'm not allowing unconstitutional laws to put me in a position where I'm going to be so shamed and feeling so horrible about myself and thinking that I've got nothing ahead of me that I'm going to go ahead and take my life again. No, those days are history. And with people like attorney Janice Bellucci, who's been absolutely amazing. She's with ACTSAL, the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws. And other people like her. There's other organizations, Women Against Registry, NARSOL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Florida Action Committee, Illinois Voices, et cetera. These organizations are realizing how dehumanizing these unconstitutional laws are. People make mistakes. People cause harm, but they're still people. They're still good people at heart. And to be ostracized for committing a crime, okay, fine, understandable. But to be held accountable for your entire life? No. You serve your time, go through your therapy, get back on your feet, get employment if you can, get housing if you can, have your support system right there standing beside you, with you, guiding you, and making sure that you are holding yourself accountable because nobody else can.
It's very inspiring to hear you say, never again will I be at a point where I think that I need to take my own life, that I'm not valuable. And I've stood up and fought in the streets before, and I can do it again. And there are many people across the country who do realize some of the injustice. So my question to you is, just as people are kind of listening to this show, What do you have to say to individuals who, understandably, because they're parents or they don't have any education on the issue, that say, well, registries are there so that I can know where people are and I can keep my kids safe?
Keeping your kids safe is a matter of educating them about themselves and educating them about other people. If kids who are just starting to go out on their own to the corner store or hanging out with friends without adults around, if they're aware of themselves, their own personal feelings, and how those personal feelings can be affected and manipulated, and how they can avoid that, and the fact that they have the right and ability to speak up and talk and not hold secrets, that's going to help keep them safer than any registry. Because if you have a registry, here's the problem. Okay, that person who lives on this street is a quote unquote danger to my kid. But when you think about it, 95% of sexual molestation, sexual assaults committed by people who are not on the registry, people who are under the radar. So while these people are tunnel focused on keeping their kids safe from someone who's already gone through therapy and most likely is never going to offend again, it's the coach, it's your own uncle or aunt, it's some other kids, it's somebody else who is actually the person who's more likely to do something sexual that is going to be harmful. So the registry is really nothing more than a shaming tool. It's horrible in the fact that it might even perpetuate harm in that it stops people from getting a support group together. I mean, there's people who don't want to associate with me because they're afraid they're going to see me with, registrant. Well, it's a support group that is what keeps people accountable and keeps them in line. Potential employers could be thinking about hiring you, and then they find out, oh, wow, he's on the registry, and they don't give you a job. And employment is one of the key elements to preventing recidivism and reoffense. And that's not just with sex crime, that's with all crimes. And so the registry is causing harm there. And if somebody's on the registry, there's a number of housing units, there's a number of apartments that will never, ever take a registrant. Well, okay, let's throw these people out on the street so they've got nothing to live for and no accountability.
I want to talk a little bit about some of your experiences. When you were in prison, were you a target because either you were gay or because of the type of offense?
Yes. There are good people in law enforcement and bad people in law enforcement. We've seen that recently with the whole George Floyd situation. Day one, I'm in Central Jail, Los Angeles. There was a deputy, and she was told to escort me and one other person to another unit for holding. A unit where there were a number of glass cells and mainliners, gangbangers, and I'm wearing a wristband that is yellow in color and has the letter Y on it. Now, I have no idea what this means. But as we're walking, she says, hey, can I look at your wristband? I go, yeah, sure. And I show it to her. And she says, oh, okay. And when we get to the area where there's all these glass cells, she starts shouting, hey, guys, guess what? We have a Y here. This guy's a Y. Y was the symbol for someone who was accused of a sexual offense against a minor. So I was targeted immediately. Fortunately, I got myself into the gay dorms there, which was really a safe haven. There were still some haters in there, and there was one person in there who was up for murder who actually did greenlight me, which means he targeted me. I was able to get out of that situation. Surprisingly, most people in there were friendly towards me. And what was even more surprising to me was that behind bars, everybody says if you're a sex offender, you're number one most hated. That's actually not the case. Racism, it is inherent in there, and black versus white actually takes priority. So seeing what's going on in society right now is not surprising to me. Now, I avoided confrontation as much as I could. I mean, I was involved in, some things, but that had nothing to do with race, and actually more to do with the Weiss situation. I got in conversations with this one person in there who loved to fight, and he always wanted an excuse to fight. And he ended up being sort of like my bodyguard, not because he liked me and not because he wanted to help out someone who was a Y, but because he wanted any excuse to put up his fisticuffs against anyone else. So anyone who would potentially want to harm me, there's my bodyguard.
So I think what I'm hearing here is that jail was inherently a violent environment.
Yes.
And there were some designations inside that were not something that you would normally engage in terms of white versus black and, gay versus straight and all of those kind of things. But there's a certain way that you have to conduct yourself in order to survive. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
It sounds like just a whole bunch of trauma.
You had to learn how to survive it. Some other methods of survival, I found myself a boyfriend in there. I also learned the dorms had a hierarchy. There's inmates who run the dorms, and it's like a little voted on government. Well, it just so happens that in the second dormitory that I was in, the government was run by a couple of older gentlemen. And I was able to be a liaison and help convince people of other ethnicities to accept some of the ideas, we'll say even the laws of the dorm. And I became a very valuable tool for the dorm government.
What was your life like when you served your sentence and now you're coming out? Was housing an issue, jobs an issue, relationships an issue?
Oh boy, I could probably go for a couple hours on this one. Initially, the housing situation, my family came to help me out immediately. The first couple days I was out, I was in a hotel, which they were paying for. A very dear friend of mine lived in North Hollywood, and she agreed to let me stay there until I could find an apartment. I was searching because of my offense. There were a number of apartment complexes that just turned me away in a heartbeat. Amazingly, there was an apartment complex only a half a block away from my friend that was willing to go ahead and take me in. And I needed to have my dad co-sign for me, which he obviously did. So I ended up with an apartment. I'm still in that same apartment today, and I actually like it. I mean, the location is right in the NoHo Arts District, the North Hollywood Arts District. So it's kind of cool. Friendship-wise, I called the world. I grabbed my phone book and I was calling everybody, friends, relatives, coworkers, and former clients, because I wanted to see where I stood with everybody. I realized that most of the people that I was friendly with in the past were friendly with me for one reason, because they wanted me to help them out with the entertainment industry. So to me, okay, I'm learning the value of true friendship versus false friendship. So I only had a small handful of friends, but these people were amazing. I mean, showing all kinds of love and kindness. Now, the interesting thing about that, this is a real dichotomy. Most of them would not allow me inside their homes. And the reason is because other family members might be upset. And I can understand that. I mean, it doesn't make me happy, but you know what? If that's the rule that's going to apply, but we can still see each other either at my place or go out and meet at a restaurant or movie theater, okay, fine. So of that group of friends, I've lost a few more over the years because they had pressure put on them when it was found out that they were friendly with me, and so be it. But there's others, like I said, through and through, they've defended me. They've stood up to haters and said, look, he's a human being, he's a person, did wrong, but he's a good person.
So if you come out to Connecticut, you're welcome in my home.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Maybe I will one of these days. Employment was extremely difficult. I applied for job after job after job and, was getting nowhere. There were still some people in the entertainment industry who valued my advice. And although they weren't having my friendship, I was able to, we'll say, consult them and help them out. Not for a fee, but if they wanted to give me, a couple of bucks on the side or take me out to lunch or whatever they wanted to give me was fine. One other registrant got a job canvassing for someone who was running for office. He said, look, you can do this job too. I don't think probation is going to stop you. And probation had blocked me from taking some other jobs for just ridiculous reasons. So I started canvassing, and I had to report anytime that I might be alone with a minor, because obviously that's one of the rules. I'm not supposed to be alone with a minor. So at one door, several weeks in, it was only a kid who was there. So I handed him a pamphlet, quickly walked away, and there was a camera there. So I knew I wasn't getting into trouble, but I still had to report it. So I did. And at that moment, probation officer said, "You're no longer canvassing. You can't do that anymore." So I asked, "Can I just do phone banking?" And they said, "Yeah." I turned out to be pretty valuable. I ended up working on 3 different campaigns, subsequent campaigns for different people running for office. On the third one, I became a danger in light of probation again.
Oh,
This time for another reason, because they actually were so impressed with the way that I handled myself in the office and on the phones that they actually wanted to give me a permanent position that would be influential in government. How scary is that?
Marty, we can't let that happen
No,
because, you have to be canceled, period.
absolutely. Absolutely.
How dare you try to help society?
Right. So what you think would happen, the probation officer said, "You have to disclose to them everything now." And I did. And you can obviously tell what happened. That was the end of that job.
So, kind of in light of that story, do you have advice for individuals who may be navigating either probation or just general living on the registry as to when they talk to people? Is it best to disclose everything up front? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say if you're developing a friendship or relationship with somebody, let them get to know you for the first couple of weeks or so. And when they do get to know you, then go ahead and disclose, because you don't want somebody in your life who is going to be a problem or is going to be hateful or is going to just dump you anyways. And if they know you well enough to understand who you are, and you preface it in the fact that you are a good person who made a terrible mistake, you feel remorse, you've taken accountability, they may accept you. I have a lot more friends today who know, because that's the way I disclosed. I would not just tell them up front. If you're going into employment, you may be forced to disclose it up front. If you're going to go into a corporation, they're going to do research on you real fast. If you're trying to get a delivery job, chances are they're going to do a background check on you. If you're going to do some work at a mom and pop store, or you're going to just do work at a smaller shop, chances are they're not going to check.
We've covered a lot of ground, and I think, we could go back and pick up pieces of these stories and actually do entire podcasts because you're very open in terms of your stories and there's so much more. But you decided to put a lot of stuff into a book. Is that going to cover a lot of what you're talking about today?
It's going to cover a lot of ground that I've covered already today, but I mean, it's going to be so much more extensive. It's my autobiography. It cuts off at my arrest. So it's not the second half. It's cause and effect. If someone reads that autobiography, they're going to learn about the abuses. They're going to learn about what was going through my mind. They're going to find out what I was thinking. They're going to realize the reasoning that went behind the decisions and the judgments that I made. They're going to realize, okay, he didn't just automatically say, "This is what I'm going to do." He had to go from point A to point B to point C. Key to prevention is education. And if 30% of people who commit sex acts against minors, they themselves were sexually molested, what's the thinking process? What's behind it? What are the warning signs? What can people look for and potentially address at a safer time so that it never happens? And if you read my book, you're going to understand my thinking. You're going to understand my feelings. And I can guarantee you that that's the same for a lot of other people out there that maybe would be offenders. And one other thing I have to say right now is that there's laws throughout the country that force therapists to report anyone who addresses those feelings or even actions that they've committed in the past. We need to get rid of those because people don't feel comfortable if they know they're going to be handed over to law enforcement. I mean, I certainly would never have gone for help knowing that, oh my God, well, I'm going to be arrested. This is going to be the end of my life. No, use this as a teaching tool, learn. And it also humanizes the monster. Everybody loves to think about Marty Weiss, the monster. Everybody likes to think about the child molester, the sex offender, all those other things. I am a human being. I'm a human being who made a mistake. I screwed up big time, taking accountability for it. So in my book, you're going to learn who I was, who I am, and You can make the decision at that point in time after reading the book, what kind of person you really think I am and whether or not you want to even be involved with me.
When you go on the book tour you've talked about, what do you think those interviews are going to be like if you get some of the big names to interview you?
I know they're going to be harsh. They are going to be hitting me very hard for harming a child. And that's what they're going to focus on. And that's what they're going to push. Because lots of people are trying to make me out to be a hell of a lot worse than what I really am. A lot of people are taking advantage of it. They're making money off my name. They're making themselves relevant in the world by using me. Okay, fine. Well, it's my turn. If you want to be one of those people, you can try, but I know how to respond.
Again, I think that as we listen to you and as the book comes out and people can use it as an educational tool, I really like the thoughts that you're sharing. This is how we stop these things. We learn more about it. You can learn the warning signs, all of those things. The accountability is there. So I have to say, it's very brave. And it seems that you are prepared in terms of having those hard conversations that there are very few people out there wanting to do. So again, thank you.
You know, change doesn't happen in society without the Stonewall riots. It doesn't happen with a lady standing up at the back of the bus and moving forward. It doesn't happen with someone standing at the steps of a podium saying, I have a dream. But those situations get the processes rolling. And I'm no hero. I'm no martyr. I stop at Marty. There's no R afterwards. But I'm someone who wants to help. I've conversed with many victims in the past several years. I've conversed with many registrants in the past couple of years. There are people who have contacted me in private on Twitter, victims who have asked, why? Why would somebody do this to me? And they come away feeling better. And one person in that situation actually is very close online friends with me today. And I first met her 3 years ago. And there's registrants who need help. And I'm there to help them too. And I want to be able to help people. I know that by doing my part, I'm taking that first step. I'm stepping up and going to the next seat in front of me on the bus. I'm standing up at Stonewall and saying, hey, enough of this. And so whatever I can do to make that happen, the registry is not going to go away in my lifetime. I know that. But if maybe some of the things that I'm doing right now can help end it and help make society safer in the future, well, you know what? I'm happy to live with that.
So, as we get towards the end of this podcast, say again the name of the book, talk about anything you want to plug. And if there's anything else that we've left out from your story that you want us to cover, let's do that.
Okay. The book itself, again, is titled Thanks for the Infamy. The other thing is, don't shame other human beings. Don't pick out individuals. When I was in my court mandated therapy, one of the first weeks that I was in there, the lady who was running it, the therapist, was shaming me for wearing a Young Frankenstein t-shirt saying, oh, you're trying to attract kids. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what? What is this? I also want to say thank you to the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws. It's run by two attorneys, Janice Bellucci and Chance Oberstein, who are absolutely amazing. They've helped me out considerably on this journey. And likewise, I've been a litigant in cases to help bring the registry back in line with the Constitution, hopefully end it. They're absolutely amazing. Frank Lindsay, who's a member of that group, he is my inspiration for writing my book because he wrote a book called We're All in This Together. And what's funny about that is my therapist who had told me to go talk to Frank because she thought after I talked to him, I wouldn't want to write a book. I was thinking about writing another book at the time, my Jailhouse Diary, which I still have. And she thought when I go talk to him, he's going to tell me about his life being attempted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that'll end my wanting to put out a book. Well, guess what? He's my inspiration for writing it. So thank you, Axol, and all these other organizations, these other groups that are out there. The Dobbs Wire, Bill Dobbs, he's wonderful. NARSOL, Florida Action Committee, Illinois Voices, all these other groups. If you're a registrant, there are organizations to help you out. You can find them. Start with the ones that I mentioned, because there's 1 million of us in the United States of America. Either they are or they know somebody who is. So keep on growing it in the United States, because at some point in time, the pendulum is going to tip.
All right. Amber, final thoughts.
Again, I just want to thank you for coming on. I think that this has been an informative conversation, and I am very much looking forward to reading the book. And I wish you all the best in terms of everything you're doing. I know that we will certainly cross paths and do some work together in the future. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And I'll echo all that and say, I've known you now probably a couple of years on Twitter, and I've seen you on some of the calls that Axel has had. You know, I knew you were a decent guy, but this just was icing on the cake for me to get to have this conversation. I wish you success from here on out. No more victims for anybody. Let's help make that happen, and also help registrants. And together we'll get rid of this registry, because it's done a lot of damage. Nobody's going to be able to make that infamy go away, but we can try to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen to the next generation.
Absolutely. Those are very kind words, Jason and Amber. I don't hear them too often, but when I do hear them, I know that I'm in the presence of kind, gentle souls. That's exactly what you guys are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marty. And until next time, Amber.
We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Amplified Voices, a podcast lifting the experiences of people and families impacted by the criminal legal system. For more information, episodes, and podcast notes, visit amplifiedvoices.show.